Yes, I'm aware of it. Okay, I'm starting the learning sponsors, and then we'll go right into the daf. A year of learning by Sue and Arnie Garelick. In memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Mann. Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, and Yerivka Pro Razna Bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch. In memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Arav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch shall assure her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Evel Bas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gidler, Avram Meir ben Shimon and Martha Gidler, Chana Bas Yeshaya, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova Bat Yisrael Dov in her memory, friends of Malka Levy, Malka Bat Yosef, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bat Asher. Month of Learning by Mordechai and Miriam Burr in memory of his father, Yaakov ben Mordechai. Friends from Yarmouth E in memory of Miriam and Michael Schiffer's son, Zev David ben Shimon Halevi. David and Mendel Cheslow in memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir. Marcia Federbush in memory of her husband, Oriel ben Harav Shimon. Gary and Marcia Schrager in memory of his father, David ben Yosef, and his mother, Freda Bas Hendel. A week of learning by Shelley and Oscar Moll in memory of her father, Shlomo Reuben ben Binyamin. Larry Fish and Vicky Rubinovich Fish in memory of his father, Avram David ben Shlomo Raphael, and his mother, Batya Chaya Bas Israel Yitzchak. A day of learning, today being the 4th, right? The Lynn Rappaport in memory of her sister-in-law, Miriam Bat Ben Sion HaKohen. May the Shemas have an Aliyah, Krank Rafia Velti Yashir Hashem Matalia, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael a good gebenched yar. Okay. So, again, I just tell it that we are starting. What happened to Sam? Okay, we're starting early because they're shutting off the power in the building at 9 o'clock here. Okay, so where are we? That's a good question. How about Kaf Chet Amud Aleph, the second line on the Amud? Okay, all right. So we're starting with a new Braita. We finished up with the fact that whether or not this could compare the window shade of for Shabbos in terms of pulling it closed to the question that what could be done according to certain opinions because it was part of the house as opposed to the issue of the sukkah. Okay, you know what, Sam? All right. What? He's inside.
He's sleeping in a sukkah.
That new member.
Sam is sleeping in a sukkah.
Yeah. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan says the bride. All right. Maaseh b'Rabbi Eliezer. Another incident with Rabbi Eliezer. Sheshavat beGalil. Okay. That he was spending a Shabbos Yontif in the Upper Galilee. Okay. Ha'elyon. Sha'aluhu. And they asked him Shaloshim halachot b'Hilchot Sukkah. And they asked him about 30 questions regarding aspects of Sukkah. Right? Shtei Masrei Amar Lehem Shamati. 12 of them, he said he had learned from his teacher. Shmonam Asar Amar Lehem Lo Shamati. And 18, he claimed that he did not learn from his teacher. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda Omer. He's going to tell us a different aspect. Okay. All right, Harvey, where are you? Okay. What did he say? Omer, Chiluf hadvarim. The opposite was the case. Shmona asar amar lahem shamati. 18 of them, he said, yes, okay. 18 of them we said he had learned. Shtei Mesrei amar lahem lo shamati. And 12 of them he said he has not learned. Amrulo, so they said to him, Kol dvarecha enan ela mipi hashmua. Aren't all the things that you've learned, all these things, something that you've learned from your teacher? Amar lahem, so he said to them.
Are you only allowed?
Well, no, that wasn't how that was found in the other. Okay, all these things, enam ela mipi hashmua. Aren't these all these things that you've learned, right, from your teacher? Amar lahem, so he responded to them. Chazak ketuni lomar davar shelo shamati mipi rabota. You have forced me, he said, to learn and explain something that I did not learn from my teacher. Okay, so he's now going to tell us a story. We're about 10 lines down from the top of the daf and kafchet amud aleph, and we're going to see that he follows certain practices which he learned from his teacher, who was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and then they're going to tell us the practices of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay. Miyamai lo kadamti adam beveit hamidrash. For my entire life, no one arrived at the Beit Hamidrash to start learning before me. Okay. Velo yashanti bebeit hamidrash, and I never slept in the Beit Hamidrash. Lo shinat keva velo shinat arai. Neither a deeper sleep nor a nap, so to speak. And when I left, I was always the last one to leave. I never left anybody behind in the Beit Midrash. And I never had any casual conversation in the Beit Midrash. It was always Torah learning. And I never said publicly, okay, anything, and that's why I'm emphasizing that now. I never said anything publicly. In other words, I never paskind, okay, publicly, something that I did not learn from my teacher forever, okay? Now, Amru alav al Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, okay, and this is what they said about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, okay, his Rebbe. Miyamav lo sach sichat kulin. By the way, just notice the difference in the order of some of the things. I thought that was I'm just throwing that out as a side comment, but it may say something about the individuals.
It says, I never spoke stolen in shul or in the base medrash. Reb Zakkai, he never spoke ever at all.
Right. Okay. So miyamav lo sach sichat chulin. I never spoke any kind of casual conversation. He wasn't the kind of guy that goes to cocktail parties. Right? V'lo halach arba amot below Torah u below tefillin. And I never walked or traveled more than 4 amos without a Torah and without tefillin. V'lo kidmu adam b'veit hamidrash. And no one ever arrived at the base midrash before me. What? Right. Right. V'lo yashan b'veit hamidrash. Lo shinat keva v'lo shinat arai. And I never slept in the Beit Midrash, either a deeper sleep or a nap. V'lo hirher b'mevuot hamatunafot. And I never contemplated aspects of Torah in those alleyways that could have been dirty with all sorts of schmutz, right? Human droppings. V'lo hiniach adam b'veit hamidrash v'yatza. And I never left anyone there in the base midrash. I was always the last guy, first guy in, last guy out.
He never walked in the dirty alley then.
He never, never contemplated Torah. But
He said he never went anywhere
without tefillin.
Right. So it could be. V'lo matzu adam yoshev domem ela yoshev v'shoneh. And I never found a person. Okay, in other words, I never conversed with somebody that we sat and talked casually, but we always sat and learned. Velo patach adam delet latalmidav elahu ba'atzmo. And I was the one, even when I was the teacher, I always opened the door to the students, even though that people may have thought that was below my dignity. V'lo amar davar shelo shama mipi rabo me'olam. And he never said something that he ever never heard, all right, from his student, okay? From his teacher. This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'lo amar higia et la'amod mi beit midrash. And I never told, and I'm just going to phrase it, the students that it's time to get up and leave your studies, except in the following occasions in the Beit Midrash, chutz me'arvei Pesachim, with the exception of Erev Pesach, because you had to go home and start the Seder early, not early, but at the appropriate time, as soon as possible, so that children don't fall asleep, right? Ve'erev Yom HaKippurim, and the eve of Yom Kippur. Right? So that's Vechein Haya Rabbi Eliezer, Talmido Noheg Acharab. And thus his student, Rabbi Eliezer, followed his practice. Okay? New Breita, Tanu Rabbanu. As we get to a new. No, he's not not a question of anivut there. Okay, he was saying basically these were his personal characteristics. Right? Now, a new Breita. Right? Some of which are dinim, and some of which clearly Rabbi Eliezer followed. Okay, that's the whole point of repeating the story. Right? So we get to a new Breita. Shmonim Talmidim Hayulo LeHillel Hazaken. There were 80 students that were disciples, I'll use that phrase, of Hillel the elder. Okay, right. Shloshim Mehen Ru'uyim Shetishra Alehen Shechina Kemoshe Rabbeinu. Okay, 30 of them were worthy of the fact that the Shechina could have focused on them, just as it did on Moshe, our master. Shloshim mehen ru'uyin sheta'amod lahem chama ki Yoshua ben Nun. And another 30 of them were worthy of the fact that the sun could have stood still, just as it did for Yehoshua. Okay, Esrim Beinonim. 20 of them were what we'll call the intermediate between Moshe and Yehoshua. Right? Gadol Shebekulan, Yonatan ben Uziel. The greatest among them was Yonatan ben Uziel. Okay, we all should be remind ourselves who he is. Basically, he was the one who wrote the Targum on the Nevi'im and Ketuvim. Okay, all right. All right, Katan Shebekulan, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was the youngest. It doesn't mean he was
not the least
scholarly, but he was the youngest. He learned it when he was Eli's age, right? That's right. Okay. So what happens? Amru alav Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, shelo hiniach mikra u'mishnah gemara halachot va'agadot dikdukei Torah v'dikdukei sofrim. Okay, what it says about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he did not, I'm going to use the word put aside. In other words, he studied all these following topics: Mikra, Bible; Mishnah, second; Gemara, all right, Gemara learning; Hilchot, Halachot, all the laws; Agadot, all of the legends; okay, Dikdukei Torah, all of the minutiae of explaining Torah; okay, V'dikdukei Sofrim, and all of the minutiae regarding the various laws and practices of the scribes, right? So he learned, okay, well, we'll see. Kalim v'chamurim, both the more stringent and the more lenient, right? Gzerot shavot, and all of the decrees. So in other words, he studied everything from what he had learned, what was previous generations, and he even studied those items that could be developed by other generations, like Abaye and Rav, right? Kufot. He also studied those aspects of celestial beings that dealt with the calendar and fixing the calendar, the gematriot, and those aspects of Torah learning that dealt with numerology. Okay, Sichat Malachei Hasharit. He also understood and spoke the language of the angels. This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'sichat Shedim, and that language of the demons. V'sichat Kalim, and that language of the trees. In other words, he knew environmental aspects, okay, as well. Okay, right. Right, Mashalot Kufsim. He knew the parables that the launderers used. In other words, various common parables. Mashalim, parables that they were using to interpret Torah, explain Torah. Mishalot Shualim, all the parables that dealt with foxes. And there's also a variety of parables. Davar Gadol v'Davar Katan, greater things and lesser things. So what were those? Davar Gadol, Ma'aseh Merkava. Okay, the great thing, that was the situation in the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel. Okay, about the divine chariot. Okay, Davar Katan, Havayot Da'abai v'Rabba. Now we get to that. Okay, that was the discussions that would come about. Okay, that the Abai and Rabbah, in other words, not that they didn't discuss great things. He had an encyclopedic ability. Okay. L'kayem ma shene'amar. Why? Because it was wanted to fulfill what the Torah said. Lahanchil ohovei yesh va'otzroteim emalei v'chim achar shektan b'kulan. No, I'm sorry, v'amalei. All right, that was that basically all of these to bequeath to those who love me, there is reward, and I will fill their storehouses. In other words, he wanted to be full of Torah. Okay, now, since we had this much praise of Yochanan, I'm saying, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he was considered the youngest of the scholars. So in other words, he spent significant time learning. What about our other? Okay, Rabbi Yochanan, all right. What about Yonatan ben Uziel? Can we say something nice about him? Okay, the same way this praise is given, that he was the youngest of them all. Kach gadol shebekulam, alachat kama v'chama. So the oldest or the greatest of them all the more so. Amru alav al Yonatan ben Uziel, and they said about Yonatan ben Uziel, b'sha'ah sheyoshev osek b'Torah, at the time when he would sit and indulge in his study of Torah, kol of sheporeach alav miyad nisraf, that any bird that would fly over his head he would go up in fire. Whether it's his feathers, things like that. In other words, the Torah learning, right?
Malachim would gather around them, and the Malachim had fire.
That could be another explanation, right? You've got to remember also, just very quickly, and we'll go on with the new Mishnah, that since they've mentioned all these things with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and it included mysticism. That was the reference to Merkava. It included Kabbalah and things like that. Okay, there was the understanding that those all of us, I'm sure, are relatively familiar with the story of the four that nichnesu lepardes, that became involved in mysticism study and what happened to them. Okay, and therefore that idea. Okay, and that only 25% survived. Okay, clearly. Okay, but the implement is that it was like one sent out the nitzotzot, that the sparks okay, of that learning could actually be transferred. So I want just connect it. Okay, now, matnitin, our new Mishnah. Okay, now we're coming back to a little more mundane.
Reference this mission
Okay,
a couple of
right,
times.
more mundane aspects regarding the sukkah issue. Okay, okay, because we were talking about Rabbi Eliezer and his characteristics, and then who was his Rebbe, and who were among the other students that were excelling. Okay, so now we've finished discussing that topic. Okay, we're now back to our sukkah business. Matnitin, Misha Haya Rosho V'Rubo B'Sukkah, regarding one whose head and upper torso, I'm going to say, was in the sukkah, V'Shulchano B'Toch HaBayit, and his table was still inside the house. Beit Shammai Poslin, Beit Hillel Machshirin. Beit Shammai says it's invalid, and Beit Hillel says it's valid. Amru lahem, Beit Hillel Beit Shammai. And so Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, Lo kach haya ma'aseh, shehalchu ziknei Beit Shammai v'ziknei Beit Hillel levaker et Rabbi Yochanan ben Hachoranit. Wasn't it such that there was an incident where the elders of Beit Shammai and the elders of Beit Hillel went to visit a particular Rebbe, namely Rabbi Yochanan ben Hachoranit, umatza'uhu shahaya yoshev, and they found him sitting in such a manner, Rosho v'Rubo b'Sukkah, that his head and upper body, okay, was in the sukkah, v'Shulchano b'Toch HaBayit, and his table was still inside the house. V'lo amru lo davar, and they didn't complain, they didn't challenge him. Amru lahem Beit Shammai, and so Beit Shammai comes back and says to Misham Raya, you're going to use that as a source, okay? Afhem amru lo, even they said to him, Im kain hayita noheg, if this was your common practice, lo kiyamta mitzvat sukkah miyamecha, right? Then you would never have ever completely observed the mitzvah of sukkah correctly whatsoever. Okay. Now, since we've said this, we're going, okay, the question of fulfilling the mitzvah correctly, therefore we're going on to examine the issue, who is patur and who is chayev in fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah, right? Nashim va'avadim uktanim, says this Braita, women, servants, and we're referring here to Canaanite servants, and minors, paturim min hasukah, are exempt from sukkah. Katan she'enot tzarich le'imo. What we're talking about here is a minor that does not have a need to be close to his mother. Chayav b'sukkah. That minor is obligated in the sukkah. Maaseh v'yalda kalato shel Shammai. Once was an incident, okay, where the daughter-in-law of Shammai gave birth, and what happens? Shammai has a king, who pichet et hama'aziva, and he removed the plaster between the boards of the ceiling of, okay, of the room, okay. V'sichach al gabe hamita b'shvil katan, and he puts chach on the top there above the bed, okay, for the minor, for the young child. Now, now that was one. Some will argue that the pshat is that he did it for the infant. That's Art Scroll. Koren doesn't suggest that. Koren brings an alternative pshat that there was also another minor child there. Let's say she had this newborn, but she may have had a 1 or 2 year old or whatever. We know that can happen in some families, right? And therefore, I'm giving you the pshat from Koren too.
Okay.
And that therefore it was for that minor that he did this chach and not for the infant.
The Gemara itself says that he was
Ah.
being the man.
Okay, well, we'll see. Gemara asks now.
Because of the new birth, that's it. Rabbi
What?
Green.
It's
called Irish twins in America.
That he made a sukkah
Irish
on
twins.
Yom Tov.
Irish.
Yeah.
twins.
One guy at a time, please. Sit.
Am I to assume he made a sukkah on Yom Tov?
No.
No, maybe she gave birth during Chol Hamoed, and that's when he did
No,
it.
no, because he held the time to that. She gave birth on the 11th of Tishrei.
Okay, so
And
it
he
was
built
before the
sukkah
Yontif. So before the Yontif,
Because Shammai holds you can't build a sukkah.
on Yom. Okay, right. Yeah, all right, let's go on. Gemara,
Let's go back. I want to understand this clearly.
yeah,
We just learned in the Mishnah just now, a minor is part of a sukkah.
yeah, but he was, but basically, we're gonna see, the Gemara is gonna tell us that Shammai was Machmir. And-
So a minor, at what age, before 30 days, you want to say he went and did it, this is up to before he turned April.
Right, no, not before, Yeah, because
Because it might live.
right? That's the point. Exactly. He was so Machmir that given the fact that she was due to get that, okay, that she was giving birth or approaching birth, wanted to be sure that the infant had schach and the sukkah. Okay. All right. Menahani mili. Okay. On what basis is this? Asks the Gemara. The Tanu Rabbanan.
That women are positive.
Okay. Well, we're going to ask the question in general. What's our source? The Tanu Rabbanan, Ezrach. This is okay. When it says a citizen, Ze Ezrach. That means it's a citizen.
It's everybody.
Okay, that would include anyone who is part of the Jewish people. Okay, Ha-Ezrach, when we say the citizen, Lahotziyat Hanashim, that excludes the women. Kol l'rabot et haktanim. The pasuk says Kol Ha-Ezrach, all, right? That includes the minors. Amar Mar, the master says as follows: Ha-Ezrach, when it says the citizen, Lahotziyat Hanashim, that excludes the women. Lamemra, that seems to tell us the Ezrach bein Nashim bein Gavre Mashma, that the simple word Ezrach, citizen, would include every men and women. Okay, Vahatanya, says the Gemara, but aren't we taught elsewhere in another case, Ha-Ezrach, that the phrase the citizen, the rabot et hanashim, Ezrachiot shechayavot be'inui, that when it refers to Yom Kippur, and it uses the phrase Ha-Ezrach, that comes to include women as citizens who are subject to the requirement of affliction on Yom Kippur, right? Alma, therefore, Ezrach Gavre Mashma. Okay, that would seem to say then that the phrase Ezrach would seem to imply men only. Okay, Amar Rava, says Rava, the following: Hilchata Ninhu.
So that's the other way around.
Right, that's the opposite view. Hilchata Ninhu v'as machinhu Rabbanan Akare. Okay, that this was a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. In these particular cases, we understood one way and one the other way, and they just simply attached it to the verses. Haikra v'hai hilchata. In one case, we based it on the pasuk, and in another case, it's based on halacha l'Moshe Misinai. V'tu kra lamali. And further, on the verse, that's the case. Why do you need the verse whatsoever? Hilchata lamali. If you have halacha l'Moshe Misinai, why do you need it whatsoever? Hasukah mitzvat aseh shezman grama. Here we say that a sukkah is a mitzvah that is time oriented, right? V'kol mitzvot aseh shezman grama nashim pturot. And any mitzvah that is time fixed, time oriented, we say women are exempt. Yom HaKippurim, Midarav Yehuda Amar Rav Nafka. We say with regards to their requirement for Inui on Yom HaKippurim, this is according to Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. That's where it comes from. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, V'chein Tana Debe Rabbi Yishmael. So says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, as is also taught by the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael, Amar Kra, saying based on a pasuk, Ish o Isha, a man or a woman, right? Okay, going on. Now, Hashta Hakatuv Midaber. Okay, and here Hakatuv, Hashta Hakatuv Isha Leish Lekol Unshim Shebatorah, that the text of the Torah compares women to men regarding all unshim, all punishments. Okay, all lavim in the Torah. Amar Abai Liolam Sukkah Hilchata V'itz Tarich. We say that always sukkah is, in this case, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and it was necessary to say that. Why? Salka da'atcha amina, because it's possible I might have said teshvu ke'ein taduru, where the pasuk says you have to dwell. It means like you dwell in a normal habitat. Ma dira ish ve'ishto, afsuka ish ve'ishto. The same way in a normal habitat, a man and a woman, so likewise in the sukkah, a man and a woman. Kamash Malan comes to teach us there that it's this halacha l'Moshe Sinai, tells us that's not the case. Now, Rabba Amar says, Rabba, it's tarich. It was necessary. Sal Gadat Hachamina. It's possible I might have thought to say, Yalif Chamisha Asar Mechag Hamatzot. Learn the 15th and the 15th from the holiday of Pesach. Ma lahalan nashim chayavot, hafkan nashim chayavot. I might have thought that the same way for Pesach, women have an obligation, okay, to eat matzah, exactly. So likewise, they have this obligation for the sukkah. Kamash malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Vahashta the amart sukkah hilchata. And now the fact that you've said that we learn this requirement as a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, okay, frizivi sukkah, kra lamali. Okay, if that's not the case, why do I need a pasuk? L'rabot et hagerim, to include converts, salka da'at hachamina, because it's possible I might say where the pasuk tells me ha'ezrach b'Yisrael amar rachmana, that's where the Torah says it's the citizen, okay? Oh, we're not there yet. The citizens of Israel, okay? What does it mean, citizens? V'lo et hagerim, that might not include a ger because they're not either yet a citizen or they're not completely yet a citizen. In other words, they may be in the process of gerus, okay? Oh, it's possible. Okay, they could have done one thing and not completed. Okay, so we're going to get to it. We're going to get to it. No, not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Avalo et hagerim, kamash malan. It comes to us that they are not considered a citizen who are part of the Israelite people yet. In other words, they're either descended from them or completely converted. Kamash malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Yom Kippurim, Midarav Yehuda, Amar Rav Nafka. With regards to Yom Kippur, we say that comes from Yom Yehuda. In the name of Rav, it comes. Lo nitzracha ela l'tosefet inui. That we might say that comes only regarding the requirement, the additional aspect of affliction. Sal gadat hachamina. It's possible I might have said, Ho'il umi'et rachmana l'tosefet inui, me onesh ume hazara lo netchayvu nashim klal kamash malan. It's possible I could argue that since we're dealing with only this additional element of affliction, I could have thought to say that this was minimized, by the Torah for this aspect, as opposed to an aspect of any punishment or warning, okay, that was not made obligated a woman whatsoever. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Now going on, Amar Mar. So he said the following: Kol. What does it mean? All the Rabot et Haktanim. A new piece from our Mishnah that we said this includes minors. Vahatnan. But wasn't it taught in the Mishnah? Nashim va'avadim uktanim turim min asukah, that women and the Canaanite servants and minors are exempt from sukkah. Lo kasha, it's not a problem here. Kan bekatan shehegia lechinuch. On the one hand, we're talking about a minor that has reached an appropriate age of education. Let's say 4, 5, 6, around there. Kan bekatan shelo hegia lechinuch. And the other is a minor that has not reached an appropriate age of education. Katan shehegia lechinuch midrabananu. But the fact that we say that a child reaches the age of education is a rabbinical aspect. In other words, they were the ones who defined what age the child needed to study. Okay, midrabanan, that's rabbinical. Ukra ismachta ba'almahu, and the pasuk then is basically a general ismachta, like a hook that you hang, that they hung it on as clarification. Now going back, katan she'enot tzarich le'imo. We said that we were defining that minor as someone who didn't need his mother. Hechidami, and what's the case? Katan she'enot tzarich le'imo, that a child doesn't need its mother. Amar debe Rabbi Yanai, and they explained it in the Academy of Rabbi Yanai. Kol shenifne ve'ein imo mekanchato. It's a child who doesn't need his mother to clean up after him. Toilet trained, exactly. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol Shnei Or Mishnato Ve'eno Korei Ima. Any child that wakes up from his sleep and doesn't call out for his mother. Now, the Gemara is going to clarify this later statement. Ima, calling out for mother, Gedolim Nami Kara'u. There are older child that when they first wake up, they also call out for their mother. Aim the Ella rather, Ema, I would say, Kol Shnei Or Ve'eno Korei Ima Ima. If it doesn't continuously call to their mother, that means she didn't teach the kids smart enough to call out for the father.
Kids don't do that instinctively.
Now, Sid, we're going to get to Shammai. Okay? All right. Okay. Ma'aseh l'stor. Are you coming to tell us that this incident comes to negate, to destroy the previous statement in our Mishnah? All right. Chasuri michsara v'hachi katani. Something is missing, and this is what we're going to learn. V'shamai machmir, and Shammai was very stringent. U'ma'aseh nami, and this incident also. V'yalda kalato shel Shammai, right? Hazaken, and the daughter-in-law of Shammai the elder gave birth. Upachat et hama'aziva, and he removed the plaster. V'sichach al hamita b'shvil hakatan, and he covered the area over the cradle, I'm going to use at this point, or the bed of the small child. So here, this does imply, unlike Steinsaltz's Koren explanation, that it was actually for the newborn infant, okay, that it was done, okay? That's why I wanted to bring both. Well, I'm just, okay, I just wanted to clarify so we could get here. Okay, Mat Nitin, in the time we have left, okay? Really good. Kol Shivat Hayamim Adam Oseh Sukato Keva. For the entire 7 days, a person should make his sukkah fixed, in other words, sturdy. Okay? right? What does it mean, sturdy and fixed? That he can dwell in it, eat, sleep, drink, etc., play cards if he does that. Okay, all right. Ubeito ari, and his home should be temporary. What happens? Your dug shamim, if the rains fall, mematai mutar lifnot. At what point then is it permissible for him to exit? All right. Misha tisrach hamakifa, when his porridge begins to
The
smell.
oatmeal is too
Okay.
polluted by the
They,
crops.
in other words, your soup, your drink, your meal gets ruined. Okay? Mashlu mashal. And therefore, what happens? They gave a parable to explain that answer. Lama hadavar domeh. To what can this be compared? Following le'evid sheba limzo kos l'rabo, to a servant who comes to bring pour a cup for his master, v'shafach lo kiton al panav, and he
Yes, of course, spills
and
water.
the